So today is our December session, which is with the title, obviously, from our Blended Stories series that we've run throughout this year, really focusing around bespoke or out of the box is the title, which obviously could mean many things to different people. So we will pose that question before we actually get started. But before I start that, I'd like to perhaps introduce our sponsor for today. So Jan, perhaps if you give us a bit of a brief introduction and the emphasis on the brief, please.
Always struggling with the word brief here. I will share my screen. This is the commercial moment of this exercise. I will take 2 minutes to explain to you who Emissio is and what we do. Emissio is Latin for blended or mixed, and that's what we are. A mixed business, and we do a lot of blended learning, it happened to be. Not all the time, but what is key is that we help training companies make more training impact. That's really what we do. And to focus on that and to emphasize that, to give a bit more meat on the bone, so to speak, blended learning, personalized social learning, or immersive. Also, everywhere, meaning that sometimes we sit behind a computer, sometimes we're on the road, and we access content or learning through our mobiles and other devices. And of course, data is more and more important in this world. And certainly, if you want to measure training impact, that's the key element, isn't it? So those are some of the things that we care about, we talk about. How do we do this? Well, learning platforms, specifically a new Spring as a blended learning platform for training providers, bespoke content and content libraries. And this is perfect for this conversation because both content and platforms, is it bespoke? Is it out of the box? Is it customized? What do people prefer? What do people use? But we also use a lot of services to launch and scale, because impact can be both the quality, let's talk about training quality, but also the quantity. And that means more learners. That's also impact. So both we help companies with. We like an evidence-based approach, and that's why we sponsor research, we do research, we collect stories from training providers, and then we like to share that with the community. And that's exactly what we do here today. In these monthly webinars, we also do events. We even organize a conference where we share how people achieve impact in the community. Evidence-based approach I mentioned. So research, case studies, here are some examples. For example, on the left-hand side, we do a couple of years now, we work with University of Oxford, in creating a report on training provider trends. So if that's something that you like to know more about, find it on our website or give us a shout and we will share these things with you, of course. And when I talk about sharing with the community, here are some of the events that we do. Future-Proof Your Training Business is an event we do. Probably going to happen in about March time next year, 2024. And our conference, the Business of Training Conference, we did that in October. So also looking at that kind of time frame in 2024 again.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Oh, you haven't
Almost.
finished.
Carry on, Paul, you're too fast to the mark here. Impact. This is my last bit. Impact. What also for us? What does that mean? Well, since we started, over 1 million learner licenses have been bought by our customers. So we do work on at scale, and we help training companies scale up. But also, we looked at some of our customers and what the revenue was that they created with the work that they did through us. And that adds up to over more than £14 million. You can't say 1 million learner licenses equals £14 million. That's not how it works. But we couldn't find with all our customers what they were charging. So that is the proven bit. And award winning. There are a number of companies that have won awards to us, and our latest, I should say, feat was a month ago, where at Learning Technologies Awards we won silver with our customer frontline for blended learning. That was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. No, thank you very much for that short intro. And perhaps I would like to now perhaps focus a little bit on our guest today. I had the privilege, obviously, meeting Roy a few weeks ago at LN Connect. And what really sort of come to me is that when I've done lots of these events and these webinars as well, that it's about having real life stories, the relevancy of that impact as well. And I know, Roy, you had a really great session at LN talking about that impact. And so that sort of spurred me to say, look, Roy, if you've got the time, we would love to be joining us today and being our guest. But perhaps the best thing to do is perhaps if you could give us a little bit of an insight to who Roy is and perhaps your role, that'd be really appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm coming to you live from Rotterdam currently at the NewSpring headquarters, and I work at a NewSpring as a learning innovator, which means that I have the great job to help people with learning, help people learn. That's what it says on that one there as well. We want to help people learn, not study. And I get to inspire our community, our customers with newest trends, insights, speaking at conferences like LN Connect, telling the story that we want to share with our audience. The last story that I shared at LN Connect has been about adaptivity indeed, and about the impact we made with the medical mathematics course, because I really believe in evidence-based, research-based practices, and that supported with our technology. So I really like sharing those stories, listening to other people, learning from each other, connecting people as well. So that's why I also like to be on this webinar, especially because it's interactive and a discussion. A little bit about my background. So I work as a learning innovator at the moment. I've been a customer success manager at a NewSpring for 4.5 years, which meant that I helped our customers with the implementation of the platform. Saw a lot of their challenges, a lot of the things they did well, some things I thought they could do better, and help them with that. I love doing that because of my background as an educational scientist and my passion for learning technology. So it all came together in that job role. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you very much. And I think you followed the letter. That was a very good, precise, short introduction, other than perhaps Jan's. But anyway, that's brilliant. So as I say, really, for my point today as the host, everyone that's obviously on the session today, what would be good is, before we start delving into the title very much about bespoke or out of the box, it'd be good for everyone who's on the session today, if they would like to perhaps put in the chat that's available on the session today, where do they see themselves? Do they see themselves very much as an organization that's using very much a bespoke type of approach to training delivery? Or is it that they see out of the box is much more prevalent to their business? It'd be really good to perhaps get that sort of sense, obviously, from people that are actually on the session today. And if you can put that into the chat, that'd be really good. And any questions that you have throughout this session, that'd be really important for us. And I can perhaps bring that question to life, or you can bring it even more so to life and actually perhaps I'll queue you up to actually ask that question to our guests today. That'd be really good. So what do we look at when we talk about it from bespoke or out of the box? Jan, obviously your background as well. What does that mean to you, bespoke or out of the box?
Ooh, that's a good question. With regards to bespoke or out of the box, I'm thinking of two things within the world of training and learning specifically. That we just did an overview of what we do as Emissio, so I'm going to take two angles. You can talk about platforms.
Yep.
And you can talk about content. If I start on the platform side, then I've encountered several training providers, training companies that have built their own platform because they felt that in the market they couldn't find a platform that was specific to their needs. Now, I would like to argue that actually in the platform market, the learning platform market, is a fairly crowded space. There's a lot of training companies, a lot of learning platforms out there. And I would find it hard to believe almost nowadays, and I can't speak for 20 years ago, but nowadays that there isn't a platform out there that would suit 99.9% of people's needs. Also, a platform maintaining, developing is a very expensive business. And if training is your core business, but not platform development, then I would argue find something that's out there in the market. Anyway, that's my position on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's always, it's trying to get the insight, because I believe in business, there's a balance between the two, and it's what is the most sort of prevalent. Because I put a list together when I was looking at the two options, and I had, in one hand, I had time against cost savings, but then on the other side, it had about the relevancy as well, from those perspectives. Roy, perhaps the same question to yourself, when I talk about bespoke, or I talk about it, out of the box, what does that mean for you as, from an educational scientist like yourself?
I like the learning technologies, learning platform perspective that Jan took. I hadn't really thought about that way, but I do think that my idea of bespoke and out of the box link to that. So when I look at content, for example, you've got quite some bespoke or out of the box platforms that offer content. So in my I think that if you look at out of the box, you could think of, for example, the Skills Town, Good Habits. Those are learning platforms you can get a license to. And with that license, you get access to the content that is provided on that platform. I know, for example, Good Habits, you can buy a license for, I don't know how much they offer. They go for now, but 25,000 euros. And then your whole organization can just use all those courses and learn from those courses. In my opinion, that's out of the box. You get what you see.
What it says on the tin.
What it says on the tin, exactly. And then with bespoke, I think that is an offering that is more tailored to your specific needs, and therefore also costs you more effort, more time, to create your own training program, and make it more specific to a specific target group you are targeting. So if you look at training providers, I can imagine that the knowledge, the expertise is in-house, because that's why you're becoming a training provider, because you have knowledge to share. You want to educate people on that specific topic. And then, in my opinion, off-the-shelf content makes less sense than creating your own content in a bespoke platform, because it's with the off-the-shelf, it is more general, more generic, and it's more complementary to what you do yourself as a training provider, in my opinion. So I think there's I'm also, well, I'm not sure if we can say if I'm a bigger fan of one or the other, but I really believe in the bespoke direction.
Okay. And I'll say that today I want to try to give it a balanced view. So if two views are really good, and anyone else got any comments, then please use the chat facility. Kirsten, I just see you raise your hand. Have you got a question that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, I wanted to. Sorry, I'll introduce myself. I'm the marketing executive at Inmissio, so I'm on the team with Jan and Paul. And Roy, I wanted to ask you about using out-of-the-box content as a framework that you can then enhance with your own personality. So thinking about content not as an either or, but rather could you amalgamate sources from different areas that you like, sort of put together a structure of your course, and then go in and use various features, whether that be the sort of pinning descriptions on images, or turning that into the flashcards, or designing that around learning objectives, to just essentially stop it from being a blank slate. You know, you want to be able to play off something, to feel that you can kind of develop something that you've already got, rather than start with a page that has nothing on it. So how would you, have you worked with customers who wanted that kind of framework to start with, and then sort of put their own spin on it? And, you know, how would you sort of advise someone who's thinking about going down that route?
That's a good one. Of course, the title of the session is Bespoke or Out of the Box, but I do agree that there's a good combination that's possible. Looking for my own background, so I work at a NewSpring. We're a learning platform for training providers, and you can create your own training. And with us, you do get sort of the blank slate, and that can be an advantage if you have all the expertise and the time and the knowledge that you want to put in a platform, or it can be a disadvantage if you just have a certain goal you want to educate your employees or other people, but you don't have the time and you don't really have the knowledge yourself. So then it's good to not start with a blank slate, but start with something out of the box. And I did see some customers that, for example, used Good Habits to build courses around that. So the out of the box courses are, of course, crafted with a lot of precision, and they've got the good theories behind them, and they're more generic. But sometimes having a more generic overview of a specific topic can really help you to connect the dots when it comes to your own practice. So say, for example, you get the Good Habits course on giving feedback, which is a very generic thing. You don't have to create that giving feedback course yourself from scratch, because there's been companies that created that course for you. But I think then after that, it's important to connect the content from that course to something that's relevant for your own practice. So giving feedback in a generic situation can be very different than in your own specific situation. For example, if you work in the wind industries, giving feedback in general can help you getting an overview. But in the end, it comes down to how can I apply this knowledge in my own practice, and what do I have to think about when it comes to giving feedback on the plant or wherever you are. So I feel that then this out of the box content becomes part of a bigger learning journey that you enrich with your own case study, with your own scenario based questions, with your own reflection activities on how you've learned about this specific topic. Go back to the plant and reflect for yourself. How did giving feedback work for you in the last 3 days? What did you see around you, and what struck you as most surprising when it after you did the generic feedback course, for example, and then you try to connect that generic course more to the real life world where people have to apply it in. And I've seen customers doing that, and I think that's very useful and makes an out of the box course content stronger as well. Is that a bit of an answer to your question? Sorry, Kirsten.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful. I think when it comes to, say, just applying, you know, somebody else's pre-made structure, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So it's good to think about what aspects of your course, I think, are based on just sort of general frameworks, and what aspects you really want to tailor to your organization and also to your own sort of personal style, whether you like to put a humorous spin on it, whether you like to make it more personal for your learners. We have a few customers who they're not interested in testing, they want reflections on the content. And so that's a really nice way to make a course more interactive and also more personal for the learner, I think. So I think that's another angle when it comes to bespoke versus out of the box, is there's the content, but then there's also how you're getting your learner to engage with the content. you might want to add some games. You might want to add some sort of more interactive elements.
And that all, of course, depends on your target group and who you have in your audience. For some groups, gamification, like you said, works better than for other groups. For some groups, you might incorporate more video, and in other groups, having a big article is also fine. Talk to lawyers, for example. So it really also depends indeed on who you have in front of you, and you can tailor your course to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen examples as well of, like, that have the, shall we say, like the fundamentals, the foundation concepts are built in that generic out of the box content, and then really what it's, that obviously may include obviously industry best practice or something like that. But when there's a change in the market space or a regulatory change as well, it's then how can you be perhaps responsive to those changes with the different types of content that you've built. If you build it bespoke or out of the shelf, when the situation does change, which one would you say could be more responsive to sort of regulatory change? If I was in the financial services, perhaps, Roy, as an example, some regulatory change come through, and if I'm the consumer of that as a training provider to coming to me, it's like, well, hang on, which one could be more responsive, perhaps, in the way that it's actually developed and delivered, basically, to my target audience? Which one would you say could be more responsive?
I think it's also a matter of, so I know, for example, and then it's also about the technology, I think. So if I look at a NewSpring, it's quite easy to change the content that you have in the platform with content libraries to make sure that the content is up to date. So you've got a content library on specific financial regulations, and then it's easy to find that content, change it, and then it's applied directly for all the courses, for example. But that means, in my opinion, that it's sort of bespoke because you've created it yourself. When I look at out of the box, for example, let's take Good Habits as an example, or Skillsign as an example. The responsibility of updating the content lies with that provider of content. So if there's a regulation change, I think it's Good Habits or the out-of-the-box content provider who needs to make sure that that content is up to date. If you look then from a technological perspective, there's several ways to get that content from this content provider to your own platform. One that's been used in the past very often was SCORM. So you download the SCORM package, and that SCORM package was plugged into your own system or uploaded into your own system, and then you could use that specific out-of-the-box content. The advantage is that it's fairly easy. The disadvantage is that if something changes, it doesn't necessarily change in that specific SCORM package. It just stays the same. You have to upload a whole new SCORM file, and it brings with it a lot of hassle. Whereas newest standards like LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability, give you the ability to access content that's hosted on another platform, and then that other platform has the opportunity to update content, and that will directly be updated on your own platform as well. So that makes the interchanging of content between training providers, content providers way easier, and therefore also updating content way easier because the content will always be relevant. And it can go both ways, of course. But
no, because everyone talks these days, as we were talking about AI just before, we are now an AI business type of thing. It's about people just put a quick badge on things. But what we also hear about is that organizations are looking very much for like that ecosystem type of approach, and the way the interoperability of these tools, the content is coming more and more sort of prevalent now that we see when we have conversations. Is it something that you're seeing in Europe as well around ecosystems and operability within content and perhaps platforms?
Definitely, yeah. I know that when you look at those different systems, those different out-of-the-box content providers like a Good Habits or a Skillstown,
Mhm.
they never come on them by themselves. They usually have to be integrated within a specific ecosystem where employees, members of associations or whoever can easily access
Mhm.
those platforms. So I think accessibility is then also an important part when it comes to ecosystems, not having 5 different usernames and 5 different passwords over all kind of different platforms, but
Mhm.
having that sort of integrated in an ecosystem and having easy access to all these different tools that you want to utilize for a specific purpose is, I think, very important, and becomes even more important, I think,
Mhm.
with all these different tools scattered all over the web.
Yeah, because I suppose there's a playoff as well. When you look about the box, you think, oh, that's a quick deployment type of element to it. But really, from me as an organization, we always look really much about that the differentiator, that impact, and perhaps the individuals that will be consuming that is great. I've put a sticky plaster against the problem. Something's happened. Right, okay, I can go and get some out of the box content, solve the problem, but am I really solving the problem, or am I just pushing it over to one side and put a tick against it? Or do I really want to focus on perhaps like the individual, the learning pathway of an individual? Because if I look at it from a commercial perspective, what do I want to do? I can actually get out there and put that generic content and solve a sticky plaster. Or is it better then to perhaps look at a custom, bespoke solution, because the value proposition is slightly different? Have you had any experiences like that actually, by giving me a bespoke solution, is actually I've got a returning customers to me because the experience, the impact that it's given to me as an organization has far weighed out getting an off the shelf, out of the box type of proposition? Because it's what I was listening, even when I was down at the LN Connect, what people don't really talk about is impact. And I find it amazing today that we have all these systems. Yeah, Jan was talking about data earlier in his sort of opening slides, but what do you see it from a question point of, if I've presented, I can fix you now very quickly and I can give you a solution tomorrow, or spend a little bit longer and get a bespoke solution. A bit with obviously your experiences, I think I know where you're swayed to, but it's also about the business benefit. And what would you say I saw some stats when I was listening to your presentation about the impact of actually cost savings, because you talked about an adaptive program. Could you perhaps expand a little bit more on that perhaps as well?
Well, that's interesting, because I think that specific adaptive learning journey you're referring to is sort of out of the box. It's been generically created, with healthcare professionals in mind, but it's a generic solution, not something that's bespoke for every specific organization.
No.
And that really had a high impact, but that was because it was really designed with that specific target group in mind. And I think with a lot of this out of the box content, it's not particularly designed for your target group. It's to serve a very broad audience. And I think that if that's scalable, it's cost efficient. But if you look at it from an impact perspective, I think it's really difficult to get the impact you want in your own organization with that content that's been designed for a lot of different people. So I really believe that going back to what is the problem we are solving with the solution we are creating, or who are we creating this solution? Who are these people? What do they need? How does their work look like? What kind of skills do they already have? What skills do they need? Comes down to a target group analysis, content analysis, like those kinds of things. I think it's very relevant to have those discussions with your stakeholders, with the people involved, and then tailor your solution, albeit out of the box, or your bespoke solution to those specific needs, and to really address that problem, and to make sure that the solution is aligned with what people are expecting. I think that's really important. I think a challenge there is that still a lot of people in learning and development. That's of course what Ellen Connect is more targeted at, learning and development professionals. They still are seen as sort of the place people go to if they want to have a training, if they want to have a patch somewhere, and they expect L&D to just come up with a course or an e-learning on a specific topic, and then they'll have it fixed. But I think it's important to get your stakeholders in sort of a mindset, or at least have a seat at the table before they come up with a solution, so you can already help them with getting to the right solution, so to speak. So not being passively waiting until someone comes to you say, I want this, but try to be more proactive and try to think along with a possible solution when the problem arises, sort of. And that does mean more time investment from or more, it's going to be, I think, more costly, but in the end, I do think there's more impact, and I think the business value will get more value from what they're for what they paid for in the long run.
Yeah,
I've seen some. When you talk about content and you talk about making it available for a bigger audience, what we did in the company that I worked for 20 years ago, at the time was called NetG. What we did is we had this, we called it learning objects, NetG learning objects. Imagine Lego blocks, tiny little modularized pieces of content on a particular topic. So you talk about topics that were maybe between 3 and 10 minutes long. And if you have a lot of that in your database, you can then create, of course, a lot of different types of courses from all the objects that you have. Now, we were a big content provider, so we had thousands of these learning objects. With the cost of content creation coming down rapidly through AI tools, I think there is, again, a case to be made for training providers actually to make those learning objects and then put them together for the individual courses. The trick is small, tiny little modules. And there is, of course, there's still a cost to it. But I think that actually, if you're, let's say, a mid-size to larger training provider, I think that's an investment well made. I think that the most training providers at the moment still make the mistake of creating long learning journeys that are not modularized and therefore maybe spend a lot of time and money on that. So I'm advocating small learning objects, build a big database of those, build a lot of them, and then instead of bespoke or out of the box or off the shelf in this case, actually you use a customized version. And this is what I also like about blended learning, is where you can take something that is relatively, I say relatively, generic content, and then the instructor, of course, has the opportunity to contextualize that content for the learner in their specific situation.
That was my about a blended approach. So
yeah,
you
absolutely.
still use the general, but then it sort of still boils down to the question that Kirsten just had, like enhancing that generic content, but then not with other content or activities, but more via the instructor who uses that content and try to contextualize it to the world of the participant in the group, sort of.
Yeah. I think there's two elements of making that content relevant. One is through technology. Of course, the example at hand is creating an adaptive learning journey. So the technology helps that and helps the learner. But also, the human in the loop in AI terms, and that is the instructor. So I think both have a role to play in that contextualizing or making relevant.
Yeah. Would you say then in that context, then what we're looking at is then the very much like the socially connected learners, and then perhaps the mentoring basically by facilitation in that. So although you have the content, be it out of the box or bespoke, you know, the fact is then really, I appreciate you just made reference to it, but the activities around that to bring it to life is perhaps sometimes another salient point that we should actually consider when we're looking at training and training outcomes as well. It's like, how do you bring it to life? Because if you just sit it there and you don't engage with it, or you don't have socially connected learners with it as well, then you start to lose the impact, and it just becomes a tick box exercise. You know, I've seen that in the past as well, and different experiences. Have you sort of bear witness to any of those type of activities where we're looking at how you can actually, or that regardless of the source materials, but really bring it to life for people that are actually learning, Roy?
That's a good question. In the meantime, a lot of people are looking at me here in our offices. Like I'm feeling in the wrong place. But yeah, I'm not sure if I have a good answer to that.
No, but yeah, but I think it's, you know, because, you know, we always get this question, is like, well, what does good look like? And it's sort of like, do you know what, you know, bringing in the essences of that little bit of connected, or the problem solving element to it, you know, focusing on that bit of content that's come in, whichever the source it has been, and it's really then, how does that actually impact me as an individual? And then if I can actually have that and then share with peers about it, you know, I'm seeing great successes. And we had a recent project in manufacturing where basically they created, I think it was maybe a leadership program, but what they then did was then buddy up with perhaps two peers in the organization. They've gone through the learning, but then that's great, you go through the learning journey, but what happens after that? And then really taking those resources out and then really testing it against each other to really make sure it reinforces it, because we're also looking at behavioral change, you know, and those are the sort of things I like, and pretty ticks the box around some of the learning sciences that we talk about. You know, I just find that's so much more empowering to me. But it's basic, you've got to connect people, but with relevant, engaging resources. So
no, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if I've answered my own question there, but anyway.
No, well, I absolutely agree. It makes me think of sort of the social constructivism learning theory on we're with humans, you build on content that is, or knowledge that is available, and you create new knowledge that way. So with the more generic learning bites, content, information, everyone has his own perspective they add to a specific topic, knowledge from their own experience that they add, and then bringing that together, making sure people reflect, discuss, and build upon that knowledge, and then try to hold each other accountable as well, because I think that's also a very important one. Also what you said with the buddy system, of course, I think accountability is a very important one, where people talk to each other and reflect with each other on what they've seen, what they've learned, what they did with what they've learned, how they applied that themselves. Yeah, I think that's very strong, and that's something you can really replicate with just individually going through a learning journey. Yeah, I think quite an essential part of learning. Yeah.
I have a question for everybody here then, in some respects. So we're talking about the whole process of the bespoke, or out of the box. What would you say could be the most challenging thing going forward in 2024, with perhaps some influence of technology? You know, what would you say may have the biggest impact? Could it be out of the box, or could it be bespoke? Obviously, with technology, we see a lot about video, bite-sized resources coming into the fore. You know, where would you say that we should be looking for in 2024 in influences and how we deliver impactful training, Roy?
I thought it was a question for everyone here. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll start with Jan. Yeah, Jan, same question then. You know, what should we look in for, obviously, in 2024, that we see will have perhaps quite an impact in what we do from a training perspective, be it out of the box or bespoke? What do you think we should be really looking at?
I think that I think content development is a key element within this. It's an easier answer than the platform question, because content development, I think, is in the sense of A, making it relevant, B, making sure that it answers everything for your particular audience. And relevance and audience. In marketing, you would talk about segmentation or persona building. And this is quite often actually what we see within other training organizations, that creating something that matches your persona, your customer, your segment, there's many terms for this, is quite difficult, it seems. People quite often use very generic content that doesn't even address their kind of segment. And a good example is fire safety training. We were looking at fire safety training for an organization, and the question, this was a very small company, by the way. The audience was a collection of small companies, and within the fire safety training, it said, go to the person who is responsible for fire safety in your department. These are small companies. It was the owner who was the fire safety department himself or herself. So it can be for a wrong audience. And therefore, if you talk about creating content, I think it has to be relevant for your audience. And that means that even if you don't have to create it from scratch, you have to customize it and be able to customize it. So if you're using content authoring tools, then it has to be a content authoring tool that can easily enable the productization of your training. And if I talk about productization of your training, I mean every training company has one or a few training courses that are customized, that are amended for each particular customer. And if you have an authoring tool that can easily enable that, or a platform that has an authoring tool within it, like we use in NewSpring, that is a very key element that saves you a lot of time, we find. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
No, that's fine. Yeah, Roy?
I've recently seen a webinar by Dr. Philippa Hartman, one of the AI experts from, I believe she's a scholar at Cambridge as well. And she has also been talking about content creation and using AI to do content creation. And what is a pitfall, I think, for next year is that a lot of people will see AI as a tool to speed up processes that are already broken. So we can get a lot of content that's not personalized, not relevant. It's not clear what people need to do with that content. And maybe I think a lot of more of that content will appear because it's so much more easy to create that. So I think that as a training provider, sticking to your expertise, creating relevant, personalized content, bespoke or out of the box, but at least make it relevant, make it practical, make sure it has more impact. I think that's a challenge that we're gonna have to face head on, to not lose our learners, because they are like, oh yeah, I've seen this already. It sounds like ChatGPT. Don't see the value. So I think that's a really important one for next year.
Yeah, brilliant. One point I had on that, I was obviously been talking to many organizations, is obviously with the influence of new technology coming through, and AI is just one of those tools, but also what a lot of people are concerned about is the validity of the individual that is on that particular program, and how much influence using AI tools or everything like that is actually the person who's actually got a certification or an accreditation from a program, how much of that person is actually in those responses in that program. And I know that a lot of people are actually thinking about, how can I validate, not just obviously for plagiarism, but really that individual, is that individual the actual person who's actually responding to that, or is we got an AI question and it's being answered by ChatGPT to get the guy through the program? So I think that's going to be another interesting challenge, and that's why I like the use of video in some respects, of actually tell me your answer, put your awe into it, put your enthusiasm, passion, and can I get my identity through that program as well? So I think verification, I think, will be another interesting point going forward as well. So we've actually come to the end of this session. I would like to thank everybody that's been on today, and also for everyone that's been on for the whole of this year. We obviously bring this to a close in December, and hopefully we will restart again in January with some new great guest speakers like Roy. Thank you so much, Roy, for your time. Really appreciate it today. And
you're welcome.
So, my apologies. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a Parkinson asking different awkward questions, but sometimes it's about trying to bring that to life for people. So I'm sure you can turn the favor and give me some sticky questions sometimes as well. But it's been a pleasure. Thank everybody on for the time today that have taken out of their busy schedules, and we look forward to seeing you in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye now. Bye-bye.